Okay, dude. So you are a well qualified mid-level career product manager with a degree from UCSD, an engineering background that evolved into a product one. You've been on the market looking for a few months. Here we are, June 2025. Like, what is your interpretation of the job market right now?
Yeah, the job market's really weird. I think some roles are affected in different ways, but primarily, at least in tech, the market's just heavily saturated. We have massive companies laying off thousands of people, feels like every day.
Right.
You hear a news story about a big company getting laid off, and ultimately those people are all just entering the job market, right? So yeah, I think in general the difficulty is just the saturation where before maybe it was you and 20, 30 applicants, now it's you and 1,000 other ones.
And if you take that down and you singularize it to San Diego's job market, you feel it's just the exact same.
It's probably pretty similar. San Diego has, in some sense, a smaller scale of these kinds of roles.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, and we obviously had a lot of people move here during COVID.
Right.
And so a lot of those people were remote tech workers.
Right.
But yeah, I think that it probably lends itself pretty similarly because people who maybe took a remote job and came here and no longer have that remote job, similar to me in the sense of I had a job for a company based out of San Francisco, but now that I'm not in that job, of course I'd love to stay in San Diego, particularly and work for a company who's local to here. So I think most of us are probably applying to those roles, and there's definitely a high amount of saturation.
I've gotten to know you extremely well over these last 2 or 3 months. You were what I would call a walking start, during the pandemic and even just outside the pandemic. And now here we are 16, 18 months later, and it is a very employer-friendly job market. It seems like employers are taking an incredibly long amounts of time to hire somebody. It feels like they almost can't get out of their own way in terms of hiring candidates, which has got to be incredibly frustrating for you because you're extremely smart, you're extremely well qualified. It's just a matter of, what concessions are you going to make, or what concessions is an employer going to make? And I guess that begs the question in terms about salary, right? Like, I wouldn't say that companies are lowballing people, but companies are certainly taking advantage of salaries and maybe not offering as what they were, in the pandemic or out of the pandemic, et cetera. Like, what's your thoughts on the salary aspect of it?
Yeah, I think pay is always a little, it's very time focused, right? And some people can get a little caught up in, oh, but I used to be valued at this, right? And I think companies can do the same thing, but companies do a better job of analyzing current data and understanding what is the current job market. But us employees, we're often so much focused on getting the role and doing the job that we're not focused on those kinds of things. So yeah, I think that a lot of people, I think it goes into two things. I think one, people still assume their value is in line with what it was. Maybe we'll call it
2 years ago?
Pre-Silicon Valley Bank collapse.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
Pre this notion of venture capital kind of pulling back a little bit.
Sure.
And this notion of, I guess they called it growth that we want to kind of taper off a little bit. We don't want to go on this rocket ship path. We're not going to invest a lot of money and lose a lot of money to see the potential return. We want to slowly grow with maybe a little less investment. So I think people got used to that, and that's clearly not the case right now. So I think a lot of people need to shift their understanding of that was what the market was, but companies are spending differently now. So that's one aspect of it. And then the second aspect of it is, obviously since this whole ChatGPT, Gen AI movement, people are trying to understand, well, I should say people and companies are really trying to understand what jobs are A job that was required A, B, C, D yesterday may require a letter that's not in the alphabet tomorrow and only A and B tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think as an employee or a prospect, you need to be cognizant of. Like, employees don't know. They don't know yet what they're looking for fully there. And
Especially technically.
Technically, for sure. And, you know, you have to look at it from their perspective. Like, a lot of the shareholder initiatives are efficiencies. And a job that maybe we need 6 of them, maybe we needed 6 of them yesterday, we only need 4, 3 tomorrow.
Yep.
And so that movement is definitely playing into the salary, because similar to that first point, if there's thousands and thousands of people on the job market, and we know AI can lower our needs for as many of them, now that makes it's a basic supply demand curve, right? If there's more supply and less demand, the price of that commodity goes down.
Yep.
And I think that's where we're at, because we don't really know what tomorrow holds. All we know is today there's a lot of people, and as far as corporate goals is efficiencies, and so that's a supply and demand curve that's not good for our commodities price.